DJ Academics is an interesting character. I recently started watching him. Really big on Twitch. Um, and just listening to his commentary from a person who's been an employee, but someone who's now an employer, things tend to shift in terms of what you prioritize, things you value most, things you value more, things you value right now. You have all these different points of views. You have Rory's point of view, you have Maul's point of view. Screaming and decrying. All I care about is respect. all I care about is just respect. As long as there's respect, then the rest of it, cool. A lot of times you still must address the fact that if I don't have leverage or positional power, you don't get to choose how someone treats you. You only have the option to leave. And that's a lot of, when you think about the military dynamic, when you come into the military environment, you don't have positional power, especially when you're first starting. You don't have positional power. Even as a brand new officer, you have positional power, but you probably don't know how to use it because you need some experience to go with that positional power. So there's a lot of things that we must address here. But I really want to touch on the pieces of positional power versus leverage and how to know the difference, because that's where a lot of people they get themselves in trouble. Is they forget which one they have and then they don't know how to use it. Leverage is one of those things where when you have leverage, it's best unused, which is kind of weird. It's the opposite of what you might think. It's like blackmailing someone. And again, I preface that by saying blackmail is illegal. Don't do it. Cool. When you have leverage on someone, you have blackmail on someone, you have what they need or want. Let's say I have food and someone is starving right next to me. I have leverage. I have what they need. If I have water, I have what they need. If they're homeless and I have shelter, I have what they want. Depending on the climate, if you're in Alaska, I have what they need. Leverage changes based on, the clientele or, the person in demand of that product or service. So a lot of people, again, one of the first things you will learn is who has positional power, which again, when you first come in the military, you acknowledge your leadership and you meet your leadership team, and you have your instructor supervisor, you have your MTI, your direct, you have your assistant MTI, and then you have, your leadership team themselves, your commander, your director of operations, it just goes down from there. And so that's the first thing you typically encounter in a new environment is positional power. Someone who authorizes everything else. The question must be raised, would Rory and Maul have a job if Joe did not start the podcast? Whose name is on it? Who owns the YouTube? Who logs into the YouTube channel? Whose email address is attached to that? It could be a business email. Who knows? The point being is that someone authorized you to be here. And the fact that it's even possible for Joe to tell you, don't come in, you're fired. That shows you don't have positional power. You may have leverage, meaning you help build something. You have equity in terms of you've been here a certain amount of time. You invest in a certain amount of time and effort. Some people are fans of you and are only there to listen to you talk. When I first started listening to Joe Budden podcast, I wasn't a huge fan of Joe, but then I listened to him talk long enough, and it was only after Roy and Maul were on their little hiatus or strike that I really started listening to Joe talk, and just hearing his experiences, starting from being a rapper and his dealings with the labels and what have you, and then finally just retiring from the rap game completely and starting a podcast, and then going to Spotify, and then quitting that, well, not quitting, but finishing it, and then going independent as far as Patreon is concerned. You hear someone's journey as far as the experiences they acquire over 40 some years of life, and you realize, first of all, experience in a lot of cases is more valuable than book knowledge. And from a distance, you can kind of see his predicament as far as involving friends and business, and how money and friends and money and love and money and companionship, they don't mix. Oil and water. They tried. They don't mix. And especially in terms of long-term, business dealings and relationships, it's hard to mix the two, because the one variable that must be present is that both parties value the same thing at the same time. Which means an employer is going to value something different than the employee values. Joe Budden can't let the podcast just stop because employees didn't show up. I have other employees to pay. And a lot of people don't want to acknowledge the position of employer. What is the employer responsible for versus The employee, someone who just shows up, talks into a mic, and leaves. Who's going to edit that? Who's going to sync the audio and video footage? Who's going to add the show notes? Who's controlling the lighting, the camera angles? Who's switching the cameras? Who's balancing the audio? Who's editing the audio? Is the video color corrected? These are all things that even a person like myself who's just running a simple YouTube channel, there are many different things that must be accounted for. Lighting is one. I have 3 lights in this shot. One is out of shot. Well, 2 of them. Well, 4 because the candle. The point being is that when you own something, or when you're interdependent in a given environment, there are many different variables that you must be responsible for that other people who are simply employees who just show up cannot know. It's different. In the military, you learn that very quickly as far as doing your job, playing your role. There are a lot of things that I can't talk about even when I'm at work, and I may think I know the answer, but because I don't have positional power, I may think I have leverage, but because I don't have context, I don't have the proper point of view. A captain will always see things differently than a senior airman. No matter how long a captain could be in for a certain amount of time. You could have a second lieutenant, first lieutenant could be in for 4 years. You could have a senior airman that's been in for 4 years, and they will see the world completely different. They will see their job, their position, their squadron, their points of view will be completely different because they're in different positions. They're responsible for different things. It's unfortunate.